You know the saying, a broken clock can be right twice a day? Well, think of the opposite of that, and that's pretty much what we end up here in Figuarts form. Yeah, I'm not proud to admit when I'm wrong, when I'm come to the defense of a toy line saying that this is objectively better, and then ever so often comes a product, a release, something that just makes me go, okay, humble yourself. As I always say at the end of my videos, stay humble. Well, that also applies to me. It's honestly how I managed to come far in an awful lot of different things, including toy reviews. And I feel like I need to eat a little bit of that crow with Figuarts Green Goblin from Spider-Man No Way Home, because after reviewing that Marvel Legends, I actually did manage to get a couple of comments saying, are you going to review the Figuarts? And the Figuarts Green Goblin from No Way Home, the final battle version, was always on my radar. I had a couple of pre-orders outstanding, but then someone near me actually managed to acquire a unit for me to pick up. And so I thought to myself, you know what? Let's beat the time crunch. Let's actually answer this question once and for all. Is this objectively better than the Marvel Legends? Is it really worth forking over, I think, average about 130 to almost 150 bucks for this exact set? And another burning question a lot of people are asking, is that mustache just as bad as some of the release photos? No, I think it's actually kind of worse. But before we get to that, let's talk about the actual look of the Green Goblin, which is in fact the final battle version. So it's going to be the green suit, but with all the added cargo bits, the amplifications, and then the strapped on pieces. And you know that one of my criticisms of the Marvel Legends was that some of those pieces really did look tacked on, but that was more of a harp on the design. And even though I'm still in the camp of not favoring that, I really wish that he was still in full goblin mode there at the end. At least the Figuarts version, I think, did a much better job of actually applying some of those pieces and making them much more flush and integral to the actual design of the suit overall. Specifically, the little plates on the leg area, the little kind of like metal pieces, especially these hexagonal kind of grill areas here around the thighs, as well as some of the applications added to the shins and even the back of the legs. Everything just looks like it's flushing better with the plastic, and even some of the purple straps around the shoulders, around the arms, and most specifically the one on his torso and the chest area feels much more flush, even though it's still, like I said, this bustling garment that they added as far as design from the movie. I just don't really care for it at all. But everything just looks like it's much more in favor of the figure and in favor of just making everything seem much more natural in the grand scheme of things. Speaking of natural aesthetic, I would argue that the paint job overall for the green is much more neon-esque. It's much more reflective. It's much more metallic. And in my opinion, I think it just kind of favors the overall look of the figure. If I were to see this up on the shelf, I'll be like, yeah, in terms of the actual suit, the actual look of the suit, it's vibrant, but it's also kind of rustic. You could maybe argue that it should probably be having a little bit more wear and tear, especially since this is, like I said, the final battle version, so there could be some battle damage, and you can maybe toss that up to a little bit of the wear and tear happening on the purple garment, but not much seen on the actual sheen of the green on the arms and the legs. But I just actually really dig the look of it all. It looks all like a legitimate miniaturized suit. The only areas that I think maybe the Marvel Legends did a little bit better would be some of the paint applications on a little bit of these cartridges on the bicep, and then again, kind of leaning into that other camp would have to be that sometimes certain things like the missiles on his gauntlets and even some of these purple panels that are on the bicep and the side of the legs look a little too clean. They look a little too pristine, like they just came out of the manufacturing line, as opposed to him having been just be pulled out of his timeline. And even on the bridge, he already had a little bit of that wear, because according to the description of the timeline, according to the lines of dialogue in the plot, he was pulled from a battle with Spidey. So he should have some much more damage on him than what we're really kind of giving us here in the 6-inch form, or 5.5 inches. That's the thing, is that the scaling on him is a little strange, and I feel like this is the perfect segue to bring in the Marvel Legends. You can see, god damn, he's towering over the SHFiguarts, and you can maybe argue that that's the reason for that being is because they want him to be scaled to the SHFiguarts Spideys. And even then, it's still a little questionable, because I've already measured him to some of those Figuarts that I have on hand. He is accurate to Tom, for certain. He's a little bit taller than Tom, just like he was in the movie. But he is towering over Toby, and for some reason, Toby is not that much taller than Willem Dafoe. I would say that they're probably on par. Andrew definitely towers over him, and that's because Andrew's a naturally tall actor. He's a very lanky guy. So he's kind of a toss-up. He's accurate with Tom, inaccurate with Toby, but very accurate with Andrew. And here, you can see that the Marvel Legends side of things, they're going for something completely different, just like Monty Python said. You have this 6-inch, proper 6-inch Marvel Legends just towering over the Figuarts here, as far as this being, I think, a little closer, a little bit more natural to about 5.5 inches if I was to make a call there. But you can see that as far as the color aesthetic, I like the actual reflectiveness of the suit. It just makes the quality of the Figuarts seem much more premium in terms of color scheming. But I definitely would not argue anyone that maybe a little bit of the worn out, opaque look to the Marvel Legends does kind of fit the actual context of where he comes from, or where he's at during this point in the movie, which is the final battle. He's supposed to have a little bit of wear and tear. It's supposed to look smudgy. And therefore, the Marvel Legends may arguably look a little better as far as that color scheming. However, props to Figuarts for making him much more of a proper physique with the leaner body. He doesn't have the pudgy stomach effect, the pudgy tummy that Marvel Legends has, which thankfully I wasn't crazy. Some other people did point out that Marvel Legends for some reason gave him a little bit of a beer gut, and that thankfully is not the case with the Figuarts. What I can't argue is in fact better on the Marvel Legends though, point to you guys, yes, it's gonna be that head sculpt. Even though it's technically much better sculpted on the Figuarts because of the extra budget, the extra skills that they got going, probably the better technology. Yeah, what the hell is up with that mustache? I didn't even believe it, because when I saw some of those promo photos that were official to Figuarts that were ending up on the package and ending up on, like I said, on listings online, Amazon, Entertainment Earth, all that stuff. Yeah, he had a little bit of stubble, but it didn't really look like a full-blown mustache. So I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Then I pop him out of the box and I'm like, no, he's got a legit Don Juan mustache going on. What the hell is that? I understand that they were trying to go for some form of stubble, but if you're going to be doing that, Marvel Legends kind of got it a little bit. Yeah, it's a little bit on the smudgy side because they can only do so much as far as the quality and the money that they got behind them, and as far as how much they're selling these for versus the $150 you're going for the Figuarts. But at least I get the message clear that this is meant to be 5 o'clock Shadow. It's meant to be him unshaven for a number of days, as opposed to, and looking maniacal, as opposed to whatever is going on over here. And again, going back to just so many things that, yeah, work in favor of the Figuarts, the sculpting, the paint, the skin tone, and even the goggles, much like the suit, flush better with the face. But man, just look at the distinct difference. This is arguably the area where I'll have to eat crow and be fair and objective. The Marvel Legends nailed it, especially when you take into account the smile, showcasing the iconic Willem Dafoe gap in the teeth, and just overall selling the imagery of the character. It just works much better. Rather indifferent on the hood itself. I feel like, yeah, the hood looks a bit more natural on the Figuarts, but it just looks like a generic hood, whereas over here, there's something kind of off-putting, but in a good way, as far as how run around and kind of spongy the hood is, to kind of, like I said, exemplify the head kind of peering through and giving us, like I said, that maniacal smile. So yeah, this is one of those areas where I'll have to give credit on over to Marvel Legends. But the crow eating doesn't necessarily stop there, because with Marvel Legends, as I tackled in that review, you can remove the hood and the goggles to showcase the Willem Dafoe likeness underneath. And when you do all that stuff, you can see right there very blatantly that that is Willem Dafoe. You have the creases on the brow and the eyes. Even though, like I said, it can kind of lean a little bit towards the cartoony side, at least I can tell who it is. And it actually fits the character. It actually fits the motif of everything that's going on, especially in context. With Figuarts, we have something a little different happening here, because the hood can be removed by simply just kind of tugging on it a little bit and kind of removing these little flaps that dig themselves into the neck area right here. And that's how Figuarts decided to design their hood. You don't necessarily have to remove the head. You can actually remove the hood as its own separate piece. But then that leads us to the next issue, which is where, even though we have the goggles and the sculpting that are grafted onto the head itself, you then have some really questionable paint applications on the hair, which fit kind of running with the theme here. Sculpting wise is great, But what is with the gray on top? It just looks like my figure's dusty. I understand that they were trying to age him, but it just did not translate well. Well, if you want to remove those glasses, you can't really do it on this sculpt. You actually have to go for the alternate head sculpt, which was packaged off to the side. And I audibly went, what the is this thing? Because, god damn, I didn't know. It was one thing for me to purchase a Figuarts Green Goblin. I didn't know I was purchasing a Figuarts Bill Bixby, 1978 Incredible Hulk figure. They tried to give my man blue eyes, but they went a little too light on that hue that it just makes him look either demonic or ghostly, or has very bad glaucoma. Look at that thing. Jesus Christ. And again, kind of running with the theme about what I'm saying here, that as far as Figuarts and their sculpting technology and their molding apparatuses, whatever kind of machines they use, they nailed the sculpt. I can blatantly see Willem Dafoe as far as the sculpting, but the paint is completely botched as far as the humongous white eyes that just look haunting. That's very vividly not how they're supposed to be. And then again, the mustache is once again back on the unglassed head sculpt. And this is incredibly disappointing. And it gets even worse. Yes, the gray that they were trying to give into his hairline right there is still way too saturated at the top and not very much of it happening towards the bottom, that it retroactively just makes my head sculpt here look like it's completely covered in dust and it's been sitting up on the shelf for years. So this is something that just did not pan out as far as ideas is concerned. This definitely needed some more time, not necessarily in the kiln, because that's regards to the sculpt, and that is great. It's the paint. I don't know if they were in some kind of transition phase where they fired their original painters or something, but I don't know what the hell was going on with here. They did toss in this separate piece that actually came on the figure, and I had to remove it to swap it out for the hood. But basically, it's the hood pulled down, so if you ever want to pose the head sculpt on top without any of the hood actually being worn on the figure, you can do so as well by simply just placing this on the back. And Figuarts is also very lucky that their removal process and swapping process for the head sculpts is much more favorable than that of the Marvel Legends. It's actually very easy to give any of these figures this quick tug. And in the process of doing so, I discovered that unlike Marvel Legends, which technically you can do it, although you're going to have to do a little bit of modification and de-gluing to do so, but with the Figuarts, you can actually remove the purple garment here on the chest by simply just extending the arm, giving it kind of like a quick push, pushing it past the peg, and boom, easily removable. You can simply just remove it and actually showcase just a little bit more of the paint applications and sculpting going on with the chest area. And in my opinion, this kind of looks a little better. It actually kind of gives us the best of both worlds, where we can kind of meet halfway of getting a classic Green Goblin suit, but at the same time, it still comes with, like I said, all the added stuff around the limb area. And then if I want to put the hood back on, like I said, it simply just kind of wraps itself around the neck piece, and these little flaps kind of rest inside of these little grooves, these little open spaces around the base of the neck. This is why you have so much room space right here whenever it comes to moving the neck area, so you can fit those hood pieces on. But just because I really want to showcase just how cool it is that they still went the extra mile of adding paint detail and even some of these little battle damage areas, these little scrapings here on the chest, as well as even a little bit on the back, I kind of want to leave the purple garment off just to kind of, like I said, put a little bit more attention on these areas right here. That's actually pretty cool. So we're simply just going to take the unglassed head sculpt, pop it back on generously, like so. And yeah, it does look a little floaty because, like I said, it's supposed to have the hood wrapped around it, whether it be the worn one or unworn one. But still, like I said, we're almost there. But you could argue that either the paint is a little too bright for the battle damage that he's supposed to be in, and that head sculpt so close and yet so far compared to the Marvel Legends. And I wish I could fit it on, but the peg is just so tiny that it's simply gonna fall off. But you could see the night and day difference that reluctantly makes me give the point to Marvel Legends. So David, it's looking an awful lot like you regret getting this Figuarts. Where exactly is all that giant price going to as far as getting the better deal for a No Way Home Green Goblin? Well, that's the thing, is that even though they did something really weird with the head sculpt, you're still able to see where that money goes. Specifically, and like I said, the quality of the plastic utilized for the body, the sheen on the paint, whether you subjectively prefer the battle damage or don't. And then you get to articulation, which is objectively, I'm sorry, come at me in the comments, but is objectively better than the Marvel Legends. Of course, you're going to have the head that can fully rotate, not only at the top of the neck, but also at the base. And look at that flexibility as far as being able to tilt it side to side, move up and down in all kinds of directions, made only a little easier by removing the hood like I mentioned before. Granted, you're going to see a little bit of, I don't want to say inaccuracy, but just a little bit of wonkiness when you remove the hood because, like I said, you have those huge gaps on the sides that are meant to hold it in place. But once you kind of get it out of the way, you can even kind of shimmy the head in place. But it's just kind of cool that you get so many ways to have his ghostly eyes just kind of follow you everywhere. Jesus, I still can't believe that they did that. But once you get to the shoulders, you get the trademark joints from Figuarts that are fully able to rotate all the way around vertically 360 degrees, extend towards the sides via the hinge inside that can also move the shoulder pieces upwards, so you can kind of get them out of the way that are on their own little hinges to be able to move upwards and downwards and even kind of float to the sides like so. And then you even have some butterfly joint action happening right there that allows the arm to fully move towards the front and towards the back. It even kind of shrug and shift outwards to kind of extend. Looks a little awkward when not in action or in motion or in a dynamic pose, but it does allow an awful lot of flexibility there for his arms. And then of course you have bicep swivels that can move the arm in place horizontally 360 degrees slightly, well actually not so much 360. You can technically do it, but only because of the busy work that is happening with his armor. You can only really go so far before I start to feel a little bit of pressure or I risk breaking any of those additional pieces or even any of this plating right here. So I don't really want to risk it too badly. But you do get the two joints at the elbows that are almost able to bend all the way up. But again, because of the busy work of the plating, it kind of stops just right about right there. And then you do have the joints at the wrists that are fully able to rotate 360 degrees, and the little hinge inside that is able to pivot inwards and outwards very fluidly. Torso is definitely better than that of the Marvel Legends. You can definitely swivel it left and right, slightly on the mid-torso cut, but it can really extend towards the back and towards the front. And it's not restricted by the strap across because it's actually molded into the plastic as separate pieces, so that's pretty cool. And then you get to the waist that can turn left and right even further and even crunch a little bit more forward and towards the back. And you can see right there that there's an awful lot of flexibility and posability happening with the torso joints, even some oblique crunching happening there. Then the top leg joints do have that trademark Figuarts kind of bend to them, especially with that extra piece of plastic. However, I must warn that because this guy's a bit more armorized than, let's say, a Spider-Man Figuarts, he's going to have an awful lot of more, just extra sculpture dealing with as far as the belt or even just on the plastic piece itself because of the little ridges and divots of the Green Goblin suit. When it comes to moving the leg forward, he can definitely move it forward very far as that right there. And towards the back, typically Figuarts allows it pretty fluidly, especially with, like I said, smoother characters like spider people. But when it comes to Green Goblin here, he can only move it far about that much. He can technically go a little further. But I've actually already kind of scared myself a little bit by pressing it further because when I try to move it back in place, because like I said, the paneling and a little bit of these pieces right here are part of the belt, he wouldn't be able to put the leg back in place because the mobility is there. You're just dealing an awful lot with extra plastic that I just personally don't encourage it. So you can do it, but at your own risk. And as you do it a little bit more, you can see right there the extra piece that is flexing itself, that is, like I said, very indicative of Figuarts figures typically. And extending towards the sides, kind of a similar case where you have that cylindrical piece inside to allow further extension, but because of how busy his armor really is, you're not going to go as far as your typical spider character. And then you have those thigh swivels that are practically the exact same case. They typically can rotate 360, but because of the way that everything is molded with those extra pieces glued on top, he can only really twist left and right only that far. He can't really do a full 360. But thankfully, the two joints at the knees can still fully bend. Well, actually, not really. Again, Another case where you have a little bit of the armor kind of stopping it in place. You can only really go about that far right there, but at least the fluidity of the joint itself still feels very good in hand. And then the little ball joint here at the ankle. Again, the left one is actually pretty fluid. I can fully bend downwards and upwards and even rotate the full 360 with no problem. But it's the right ankle that can definitely pivot upwards and downwards and slightly side to side, but can't really rotate all that well. The mobility is there, but he's got this really weird gray piece sculpted into the plastic that I guess is design accurate, but sadly it hinders a little bit of the rotation on the ankle, so do be careful with that. And even though they're a little hidden and tucked away, he does have toesies, though the actual movement of said toesies leaves a little bit to be desired. So all things considered, Jesus, I'm seeing them next to each other. Look how depressed he looks first. That's another point I'll give at least. The Marvel Legends looks like he's having a better time. The other one looks like he's facing a midlife crisis. But all those things withstanding, at least Figuarts still remains consistent with their mantra, the whole heroic action thing and the posability and being able to favor those joints to make sure that you can put them in some pretty cool poses. And even though it's still leaving a little bit to be desired comparatively to much more flexible and dynamic and very action-heavy characters like Spidey himself, at least you still got a good amount going for the Figuarts Green Goblin here. But a Green Goblin is only as good as his arsenal. We've kind of already touched a little bit with regards to like the goggles and the hood, so I guess those can be kind of considered accessories, but let's talk about legitimate weapons. One of which is technically already on person for the Marvel Legends, which is going to be the knife, which is already molded and grafted onto the arm itself, so that can't be removed. That's actually not the case with the Figuarts Green Goblin. You'll notice that he actually has the blade on one of his arms right here, but in a very retracted kind of state. What Figuarts decided to do is actually have that be a separate piece that can be removed via the peg that is underneath, and it leaves kind of like this slot on his gauntlet. And then you can take the separate knife, which is actually activated, and you can see right there that it's actually pretty decently sculpted. It feels like this can legitimately poke somebody's eye out. Festive kind of holiday pun there, but it has this exact same peg on the bottom side, simply fitted onto the gauntlet, kind of clasps itself right on there, and there you have the actual gauntlet in activated form, ready to stab Toby. But at least it looks legitimately like a blade. It's much longer, and I gotta be honest, it doesn't look as flimsy as that of the Marvel Legends. It's much better painted. Again, that could also fall on subjective terms rather, because you might prefer a little bit of the opaqueness on the Marvel Legends because it's supposed to be a little bit battle damage. But in my opinion, this is one where a blade actually looks like a legitimate blade on a figure. Both goblins come with their own singular pumpkin bomb. Again, they kind of shortened us a little bit as far as pumpkin bombs, just one each. I don't know why this is becoming a bit of a trend, but at least the pumpkin bomb on the Figuarts is much better painted. Doesn't look like a little chickpea that I can easily swallow. Well, I can technically still swallow it, but at least it looks a little bit more legitimate to being able to explode. It has better paint applications, of course, the better green on it, doesn't look all splotched on, so this is another point for the Figuarts at the very least. But the Legends has one thing that the Figuarts doesn't, and that's going to be the separate Green Goblin mask that is still a pretty cool novelty that he comes with, especially since you do have the function to be able to swap heads, so you can technically still fit this on. But I'm still gonna stick with what I said in that original Marvel Legends review, which is that as cool as this looks and as well painted and sculpted as it is, it leaves a very, very obvious neck exposure that doesn't manage to be covered up by this mask. And also it becomes a little inaccurate because he never really wore this in the final battle with this specific version of the suit. So it's almost kind of pointless to have this mask as cool as it is. So Figuarts at least threw in, to kind of compensate for not having a goblin mask, they threw in something that's a bit more functional, which is of course going to be his added hand accessories. Unlike the Marvel Legends, you can actually swap out hands. So he comes with the default fisted hands. He's obviously going to come with open hands, gestating hands, and then some slightly semi-grabbing hands for the pumpkin bomb. But unlike Marvel Legends, you can actually hold the pumpkin bomb in either one. You're not restricted to just having the right hand hold it and then the left hand be only fisted. And because of the removable blade, you can actually move the hands around, kind of gestate them, articulate them. Whereas here, I feel like the only one you can really do it with is the pumpkin one. So he can either be holding out like he's reaching out for something or holding the bomb. That's it. So at least a little bit more flexibility is allowed for those accessories that at least flush better with the Figuarts than whatever they tossed in here for the Marvel Legends, as far as things that aren't the piece de resistance for either of these guys, which is going to be the glider for each. There you have the Figuarts glider and the Marvel Legends glider. This is going to hurt my ego because I'm gonna just go ahead and spoil it. I think the Marvel Legends actually is a little better here, despite, again, the higher production quality and budget for Figuarts and how long they've been in the game. And yeah, you could toss up the paint applications being a little better on the Figuarts because I really dig the indigo blue. Kind of reminds me of my GameCube days playing the original Tobey Maguire 2002 Spider-Man movie game on the GameCube, as well as the chrome applications. It's, of course, much higher budget, higher quality, but that's to say that a blockbuster $200 million film is better than a small indie project that only costs about $1 million, and sometimes that indie film ends up being better. And this is, frankly, a fitting metaphor for what we got going on here in the gliders, because even though, like I said, quality-wise, the paint applications on the Figuarts feels better, there's something about the proportions, the gaudiness, and also the color scheming that, in my opinion, really does work better on the Marvel Legends. I actually really do prefer the opaqueness of the purple, the gray, and even some of the green accents inside of the engine. Sure, it doesn't feel, like I said, as quality. The plastic is just general plastic, but there's just so much going on for the Marvel Legends glider that, in my opinion, just suits better. Plus, you have pegs on the actual foot holders that can also be removed and feel pretty good to articulate and move about. They feel like they're ratcheted in place. The articulation is good on the wings, but in my opinion, just a little bit quote-unquote defective on the engines because it's got, like I said, that clickiness that makes me kind of scared that I'm going to break it off. But there's just so much happening here that, in my opinion, just fits the bill better for the version of Green Goblin that we have going on for here. Plus, he comes with a display stand that you can actually pop on the underside, and Marvel Legends actually bothered to throw in. You can kind of guess where I'm going here with the Figuarts. No display stand, despite having a small little hole here. They're probably saying, hey, you're spending this amount of money on a Figuarts. You have enough money to spend on second-hand or third-party bases, right? Right? You can do that, right? Jesus Christ. I still can't believe they've done this. And even though I think that the hydraulics and the articulation for the Figuarts is objectively better, I like how the pistons actually kind of move within themselves here, and the actual jointage happening for both the wings as well as the point of articulation on the inside part of the engine here is actually smooth. It's not ratcheted, and it feels pretty good to move about. The overall aesthetic and look of the glider, I just don't think it really matches that of the Marvel Legends, especially when you take the wings and flatten them all out. Look how flimsy and just kind of weird this looks. It just looks kind of paper thin. I don't remember the glider being as small as this. I remember it being more akin to this than it was here. And then again, even though some paint applications work favorably, they actually have the gold here on where the pumpkin bombs should be to kind of symbolize the eyes. They look a little too sheen, a little too clean to be coming out of that alternate dimension, and furthermore, the blades are way shorter than that of the much more accurate looking ones on the Marvel Legends, and just overall, I just feel like this thing can easily break in hand, despite, like I said, having firmer plastic, having firmer paint applications with the chrome, even some of the gold accents here on this little bit area here on the wing, the missiles, the little cylindrical parts here on what I'm imagining is like these hover turbines underneath. There's no green accents inside of the engine, so that's a bust. I kind of don't really like that. And like I said, the overall look of the glider when you flatten it down, I just don't know how I feel about that. Sure, it kind of creates this optical illusion that looks a little better when you actually extend the wings like so to kind of give it that much more iconic glider look. But overall, Yeah, I will have to give the win on over the Marvel Legends on this one because the glider here, it's not inherently bad. There's just so much working better with the Marvel Legends. Plus, like I said, no display stand. These foot holders don't have any pegs to actually secure the figure. That was already a bit of a nuisance to hold the Figuarts Green Goblin in place. It just makes the overall package just kind of lackluster compared to that of Marvel Legends. And for 50 bucks, them tossing in not only the glider but also the base itself, I have to be completely objective. This is one for the books on Marvel Legends side. And it was finally setting down these gliders, putting the goblins on top of them, posing them, and really thinking about them long and hard that I had to swallow my pride and finally say that for the first time ever, the Marvel Legends is probably the better package deal over a Figuarts. And that's coming from a huge proponent of SHFiguarts that has long been defending the company on this channel as far as giving the extra money for quality stuff, especially after how many laurels Marvel Legends has been resting on throughout 2023. Well, the buck kind of had to stop at some point. I feel like the first major misstep on their part would have to be this Green Goblin. Even though, like I said, there's still some consistencies retaining inside of the company as far as the articulation, the favorableness towards posability, especially with the included hands, the extra hands to be able to hold the bomb in different places. There's an awful lot of things here that are still, like I said, not inherently bad, but there's just not enough to justify the price of roughly somewhere between $130 to maybe even $160, maybe somewhere close to about $200, depending on where you're paying for, whether it be from overseas or within the United States. Versus that of just a flat 50 bucks, and you get the glider, you get the pumpkin bomb, you get an extra Green Goblin mask, though again the purpose of that mask is a little bit on the questionable side. You're at least being able to take that hit should you not be getting a really good version of that figure, whether it be, like I said, the smudge on the eyes or just something wonky going on with the ankles. At least it's a Marvel Legends that only set you back about 50 bucks. The Figuarts is a much more difficult pill to swallow unless you happen to be a die-hard No Way Home fan, Green Goblin fan, or Figuarts aficionado. And therefore I must remain just and give the Figuarts Green Goblin from Spider-Man No Way Home a 6 out of 10. I can't really bring myself to say that it's a bad figure and a bad overall package, but if you can manage to find a workaround deal to get them for a slightly less than MSRP price, don't really want to put out any details out there, I would say then get it if you really want to go for the quality. But if you are sincerely bothered by the mustache or something that is not as apparent in the promo photos as I was led to believe, those ghastly eyes, then yeah, I would say steer clear from this one and you're better off with the Marvel Legends. Jesus Christ, I cannot believe that I actually managed to say that, but there's a first for everything. But don't get it twisted, I still think that a good chunk of the community is gassing up the Marvel Legends Green Goblin. I still feel like I've seen better out there as far as outside of the Spider-Man culture, as far as outside of these version of the heroes. Marvel Legends has done better, and I still feel like just because they might have been able to edge out Figuarts this time around, they still shouldn't be getting complacent, and neither should we. What do you guys think so far as the direction that Figuarts and Marvel Legends are taking regarding the No Way Home figures? Who's doing the better batting average? Are you leaning towards one camp versus the other? Are you still defending either Marvel Legends or Figuarts after the various kind of takes, whether it be the Green Goblin here or the three spider guys, the three spider bros, especially after that video that I put out? I want to hear you guys' insights down below, and as always, if you guys enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up button. If you didn't, hit the thumbs down, and as always, stay humble, like I should be now, and I'll see you guys later.